Hello everybody, I'm Steve Horner, and a special hello to the friends and relatives of my good buddy, Pat Chesney. I'm honored to be here today with you to celebrate the life of my friend Pat. I first met Pat when I was 13 years old in 1961. What? It's Pat. He says, "Don't do this. You're trying to embarrass me." Pat, we're not here to embarrass you. We're here because we love you. We're here because we're here to honor you and your life. So just sit back and enjoy the ride. So I met Pat when I was 13 in South Minneapolis. Pat was also from South Minneapolis. And I told my mom and dad that I wanted a horse because I loved horses. They said, well, it might be a good idea if you go out and work with horses for a while. I was a city kid, but I had my own money. I had my paper route. And so I found an ad in the newspaper for wagon wheel riding stables, just about 10 miles south of the Twin Cities in what was then known as Lebanon Township. It's now big suburbs like Burnsville and Apple Valley. So what? Why are you doing this? He says, Pat, we are doing this because we love you, okay? So the people want to hear about your life. So stop whining and just don't be so impatient. Well, when I first went out to the ranch, well, how could I refuse? They offered me $1 a day plus all the horseback riding I could get in, along with room and board. Well, Pat was already there. He kind of forgets how he found the job. He thinks it was kind of through a friend. But when I first saw Pat, we almost started laughing right away. We were like kindred spirits. Pat had a good-looking kid, had the long, big blonde hair, beautiful, wide, bright smile, very witty, very funny, and very clever. And Pat could imitate a mourning dove. You know that woeful sound that the mourning dove makes? It kind of has an echo through the throat. Well, Pat could imitate that beautifully, and I was kind of enchanted by that. Pat could throw a rock. Pat could throw a snowball. He could hit a stop sign at 30 feet every time. I said, you ought to go out and be a baseball pitcher for your high school team. But he wasn't much into sports, except horseback riding, and boy, could he run. He could run like the wind. And Pat never drank, never smoked. All the time I knew him, almost 60 years, never had an alcoholic beverage or touched a cigarette, and boy, was he humble. He's just a humble, fun, low-key type of guy. What? He says, unlike some people we know. I hope you're not talking about me, buddy. Well, so anyhow, Pat and I worked at the ranch for every weekend and every summer for about 3 years. Pat ended up staying out there for an extra year after I left. But we would work as trail guides for people who'd come out and want to ride horses. There was about 400 acres of woods out there, which are our all homes now. But boy, did we enjoy that, being the boss of the trail guide group, and we'd go out there and have a good time. And of course, along with the horses come a lot of shoveling manure and cleaning out the barns, baling hay and straw, and the girls. That what? Yes, I am going to tell the story. Pat doesn't want me to tell the story of Nancy and Chris, but yes, I'm going to. Nancy was a good-looking gal from the Twin Cities and had a beautiful horse. She is from a very well-to-do family, and she boarded her horse in one of the box stalls for only $30 a month. Her friend Chris came out there often with her. Pat preferred the company of Chris, and I enjoyed the company of Nancy. These girls were 18 years old. I was 14 by that time, and Pat was 15. We didn't let on that they were older. So, Pat, remember the car they had? Yes, it was Nancy's. Pat says, that was a nice car. It was a nice car. It was about, I think it was a 56 Oldsmobile. It was cream color and turquoise. Huh? And Pat says, yeah, it had the big engine and had leather seats. It was a nice car. And so we would do our chores, and by 8:30, 9 o'clock, Nancy and Chris would come rolling into the ranch. And they'd take us across the street to the Lucky Twin Drive-In, which is now the Burnsville High School. So we'd get over there and buy some popcorn and some pop and do a little necking, and that was pretty much a big attraction for us at the ranch. Sure, there were a lot of horses, but we enjoyed the barn, and because what went on in the barn stayed in the barn. So that was when I was about 14 and Pat was 15, and sometimes to get out to the ranch, we would meet at the end of a certain bus line. I went to De La Salle High School, a boys' Catholic school downtown Minneapolis, and Pat went to South High School, a public school, over on the other side of the town. Kind of on the other side of the tracks is how we both grew up with our respective families. So we would take a bus and meet over there on the corner of Lake Street and Cedar, and sometimes we'd walk for a while. We'd take a bus, maybe we would hitchhike, and then what? That was funny. Pat's talking about the time that we were walking along. There were a couple of street workers, and they were digging a trench. And Pat says, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And one of the guys yelled up from the trench, said, "We dropped a quarter." We thought that was so funny. Here they were digging up the whole corner because one of the guys had dropped a quarter. Well, that was our silly type of humor, and we enjoyed silly humor. We always enjoyed Pat's Polish heritage as well, and so did Pat. He was often self-deriding when it came to, yes, I'm going, okay, well, you go ahead and tell it. Pat has a famous Polish joke, and we hope your dad's not listening, right? Go ahead, Pat, tell it. He says, so how do you get a one-armed Polak out of a tree? You wave to him. Well, we thought that was pretty funny, and it's a good thing that your dad didn't hear that, because speaking of your dad, Ed, and your mother, of course, and I liked the both of them. Ed was a big barrel-chested, about 5'10", barrel-chested, built like a refrigerator Polak, and worked as a garbage man for the city of Minneapolis. His wife, your mom, Rose, was a former Catholic nun. And I got a kick out of both of them. Remember that story about Bud? Bud was an 18-year-old who worked at the ranch. Yeah, Pat says Bud was giving him a hard time over and over, punching him a little bit, making fun of him. Yes, that's right. So he had his dad come out to meet Bud. So I remember they're sitting waiting on the concrete stoop of the tack room, and I saw Mr. and Mrs. Chesney, that's how I always referred to them, was Mr. and Mrs. Chesney, drive up. And I went over there and greeted them. And Mr. Chesney said, hello, there's Steve. Is Patty Boy around? And that's what he called Pat. And that was the only guy who could ever call you Patty Boy. And I said, yeah, hey, Pat, come on down here. Your dad's here. And Mr. Chesney said, where's the Bud? Pat says, right over here, Dad. So he called Bud. Hey, Bud, my dad wants to meet you. Hello, Bud, Mr. Chesney says as he walks up through the gate. Let me shake your hand there, Bud. And he grabbed Bud's hand and he squeezed it like a vice until Bud was literally on his knees begging for mercy. And Bud said, please let me go. You're hurting me. He says, are you going to ever bother Patty Boy anymore? Oh, no, I never will. All right, Bud, I better not hear that you have been. So he let Bud up, and oddly enough, Bud quit shortly after that.